Welcome to It's All Geek to Me, a podcast where two friends experience popular nerdy franchises for the first time. My name is Leah, and this season, my co-host Kelly will be watching my favorite films, The Lord of the Rings, for the very first time, and I'm the expert. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of It's All Geek to Me.
Woo!
We're halfway through the third movie of The Lord of the Rings.
I can't believe the end is near.
Yay!
3 decades of me being too cool for Lord of the Rings. And now I'm no longer too cool.
Now you're just cool enough.
So we left off last time at Pippin singing his mournful, sad song. And we get this little scene at the beginning of this section. And actually, I was watching it and I was wondering if I was supposed to have seen it in the last episode. But there's just this one little glimpse of Gandalf just listening to the bells toll in the distance. And he's looking very sad.
Yeah, it didn't matter if you saw that last section or this section. It's like a very short shot of Gandalf.
Yeah. Well, I figured I would mention it just because I figured it was important to see how this is really affecting him as well. And the decisions that are being made, you know, like he's not above all of this. He's in the thick of it too.
For sure. And also being at Minas Tirith and not being the ruler there, but also knowing that the ruler is failing.
Yeah.
Gandalf has to decide, does he overstep his boundaries? Does he listen to Denethor? Yeah. How does he protect Pippin?
Yeah, and we do see a lot of that in this section. It was a relatively short section though, but a lot happened.
Yeah, a lot did happen.
So yeah, after that one little shot, we see the orcs kind of preparing in Osgiliath with their huge army. We also see Rohan arriving at the camp with all of the different cities that have come forward to battle. And Theoden says to Aragorn, there's 6,000 spears, which is not even half as many as he was hoping for, and not enough to break the lines of Mordor. So they still have a little bit of time. They have until dawn, and they basically just have to hope that more people will show up, because right now it's looking grim. So then we see, just for a minute, Éomer and Legolas talking about the horses being restless. And I was thinking, we didn't see too much of Legolas in this film so far, but every time we do, he's saying some elf stuff, you know?
He's saying something weird.
Yeah.
He just like observes and points out what he observes. He's like, the men grow quiet.
But he says it in such a prosy way.
Yeah, in such a weird way.
So the place that they're looking towards is Dimholt, which is under the mountain, which is not a good place. And the horses can sense that too.
Under the mountain, not a good place in many fantasy franchises. Court of Thorns and Roses. Yeah.
In my absolute favorite trilogy, A Court of Thorns and Roses, they also have an evil under the mountain.
I can't wait till those are movies so that we could do those on the podcast.
Ooh, yeah, that would be fun. That I'm an expert in. I've read those books a lot. We actually see Aragorn looking at this entrance into Dimholt as well, and he seems a little compelled by it, which I found to be an interesting parallel to how Frodo feels towards the ring. Like, there's this weird magical kind of pull, but he gets, you know, shaken away from it.
I might be wrong about this, but I'm almost sure that we also see a very dim outline of one of the dead.
So I did notice that there was a little magical greenish light, which I also thought was interesting. I wasn't sure if I should mention it because they do seem to signify that green kind of represents the other side. Yeah. But then during this section, we see a lot of green in Dimholt. So I don't know just yet.
Remember the part in the Dead Marshes in the second film when Frodo gets pulled into the water? Yeah. That was green as well, and that was undead stuff. So I think so, yeah. And in the Dead City, it's all green.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So then we also see Éowyn with Merry, and she's given him some weapons. And he's just whipping out his little sword, and she's surprised for like a second, but it's kind of like a goofy little moment between them. So she mentions that his blade is dull, and she kind of sends him off to get his blade sharpened. And then her brother Éomer is like, don't encourage him. Yeah. And she gets annoyed, and she's like, why can't he fight for those he loves just like we are? And Éomer basically just makes fun of him for being a hobbit. So he says something like, it's not his heart, I doubt, it's the length of his arms, which I thought was kind
the
of
reach
jerky.
Of his blade or something. And also, I loved what Éowyn was saying, because she says he has just as much reason to fight as we do. Why can't he also fight for the ones he loves? She's saying that, and she's referencing Merry, but she's also talking about herself.
Yeah, I definitely saw saw a little bit of that.
Because she's not going to battle, as far as they know.
Yeah, no, she definitely is.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's almost kind of fighting for, like, why shouldn't everybody fight? So there's definitely a little hint that she's going to be in that category as well. And then a little bit later, we see Aragorn sleeping, and he's dreaming of Arwen, which again, I was cheering a little bit because I'm just hyped to see her again. So we see that she's chosen a mortal life, and she's crying, she's laying down, and she says, I wish I could see him one last time. And then Aragorn sees his necklace shatter, the one that she gave him, and then he wakes up with a start with his sword out, but it's just a summons to go to Theoden, the king. So then he goes to Theoden's tent, and Theoden's like, I take my leave. And at first I didn't realize someone else was there, and I was like, oh my gosh, is he giving up his throne for Aragorn? But that's not what was happening.
He's just like casually.
Yeah, and I was like, oh wow, he's taking his leave. But that's not
He's
what
like,
it meant
I'm actually
at all.
retiring right before this battle. Peace out.
But it turns out that no, there's somebody in the tent, and it's Elrond, which, by the way, I've been calling him Elrond this whole time, and up until now, nobody has enunciated this, but apparently it's Elrond.
Dude, same as the expert here. I was surprised. I was like, wait, it's Elrond? And you're right. I just feel like they haven't been saying the D. I've never seen these movies, apparently.
So here's the crazy thing. I watch most movies with subtitles on, including this, which is probably why I'm mispronouncing things a lot, because I've been writing them down as they're spelled, not as they're pronounced. But I'm telling you, they have been spelling it as Elrond this whole time, because I would have noticed if they had written Elrond.
And I hadn't been using subtitles until maybe 2 episodes ago, because I've been having my AC on. So I put the subtitles on because it's a little quiet. And I noticed that too. We are on the same wavelength.
Can we get a fact check?
Okay, let me look this up right now.
I need someone to check the book, because Elrond is a way different name from Elrond.
It's Elrond with a D.
Okay. I take back everything I said about his name, because Elrond is way more fantasy-esque.
Just that D adds so much.
I would like to speak with whoever's in charge of the subtitles at HBO Max, because they messed up. I'm telling you. Yeah, we got a problem here.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's just an aside. But Elrond is there, and he says that Arwen is dying and that the light of the Everstar is fading. So it turns out, which this actually blew my mind, that Mordor and Arwen's fates are intertwined. So the more powerful that Mordor grows, the less powerful she becomes, which I don't understand why, but it for sure blew my mind.
I also don't totally understand why. This is a very gray area in terms of what it means for a few reasons. One, in the books, this is done a little bit differently. Her fate is not tied to the ring. So that's kind of just all it is. Her fate is not tied to the ring. It's totally different. But also in the books, an important thing to note is that Aragorn always was ready to claim his birthright, where in the films, he's a little bit more reluctant and needs a little bit more motivation.
So it's interesting that that's somehow tied to this plot, because at this point I actually wrote down, do we know why Aragorn is reluctant to be the king? Because I don't know why. I feel like we discussed it a little bit, but I don't remember exactly. Like, why isn't he the king right now?
I think it's a lot of reasons. I think part of it is shame and fear that he'll repeat the history of his ancestors.
But why haven't his ancestors been kings the whole time is what I'm saying.
Isildur died, and I believe that when he died, it was unclear if he had an heir. That might have been what it is. I'm not 100% sure. That's what I think, but I could be wrong about that.
Okay.
So wherever his lineage went, it wasn't in royalty. It could have been a mistress.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So because he's reluctant in the movies when he was not reluctant in the books, it has been theorized that the reason they add in this plot point of Arwen's fate being tied to the ring, it's sort of like that last little motivation he needs to make sure that this gets carried out, knowing that his love will die if they fail. That's something that's been theorized. Another thing that's theorized is that Elrond is just being dramatic and she's just becoming mortal and she's just like not really dying. So that's something else I've read before.
That would be kind of crazy.
Yeah, I've read that before, that he's just being like a little bit dramatic and being like, Arwen is dying.
If he is, then she is also being dramatic, because she's crying like, oh, I wish I could see him one last time.
But that was also a dream, and I think of that more as like some sort of prophecy, but not actually what's going to happen. Sort of thing, like if he dies, it's like she chose a immortal life for no reason because this dude died anyway. That's kind of what I think the dream was with him. But I kind of like this idea of this last little motivation he needs to take his throne and save everybody.
Well, it definitely raises the stakes, so I like that.
Yeah.
But they really are struggling, and Elrond actually says that not only is Sauron coming for them, but he also has a secret force that's going to attack from the river. So they are not in good shape, and they need more men.
Yeah.
And Aragorn is saying, we don't have enough, we don't know what to do. And Elrond says, you have to go under the mountain, and you got to get those mountain dwellers. And Aragorn's like, they're murderers and traitors. Why would they help us? And Elrond says they will answer to the king of Gondor. And then he brings out the sword, which is a great moment because we get that pump up music again,
I
just
love the
hyping us
sword.
up. So he's basically just explaining that the sword is going to summon the army. So it's going to motivate those mountain dwellers to fight for them. So they got to take the Dimholt road. And then they say something to each other in Elvish, and that is just not translated. So why do they keep doing that to us?
I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know what he said.
Let's come up with a scenario of what they say, okay?
So what was the last thing they said before they started speaking in Elvish?
I'm pretty sure Elrond says he has to take the Dimholt road, and then Aragorn responds in Elvish. So he probably says, I'm gonna marry your daughter, old man. And Elrond's like, that's totally fine.
Yeah, it has to be something about her.
I'm on board with this.
What if he says, because he was raised by Elrond, so maybe he's like, you've always been a father to me. And then he responds, one day I will be your father.
Maybe he says, I've always been in love with your daughter. And Elrond says, well, she's kind of like your sister.
I like that. I like that. And then he starts rethinking everything.
So then Éowyn tries to stop him, and she's like, you can't abandon the men. And then Aragorn is like, why have you come? And she's like, do you not know? And he says, you're not in love with me. You're in love with the shadow and the thought of me. Oh my gosh. And then he says, I cannot give you what you seek. Which, thank goodness, because he was really leading her on for a little bit there.
Well, at this point now he knows Arwen is staying, and he's like, oh, okay, my main squeeze is staying. Perfect.
Yeah.
I can shut this other thing down.
Yeah. So he kind of, he's giving me a little bit of a sleazy vibe, but whatever. Now that he knows that Arwen is available, he is 100% in on Arwen. And of course, Éowyn is looking distraught, and I do really still think she's being a little bit dramatic about it. But if this is going to motivate her to be the cool fighter woman that she's meant to be, that I keep saying that she should be, then I'll take what I can get. And then, of course, Gimli wants to join Aragorn, and then Legolas pops up, and he's like, you know the stubbornness of dwarves. Yeah. So they're like, yeah, we're coming. The Fellowship back together, getting the old band back together.
Yeah. I like this trio going off together. It feels right.
Yeah. They're a fun little crew. I like them. Mm-hmm. And then there's this like interesting scene where they start heading out, and all the soldiers are like, where are they going? Why are they ditching us? What's going on? And Theoden's like, yeah, we're not going to win, but we're going to fight. So
we're going to try.
Yeah. We're for sure going to lose, and you guys are probably going to die terrible deaths, but we're going to go for it anyway, because why not?
Yeah.
And then Theoden goes to Éowyn, and she's being really sad, and he names her as ruler in his stead, which I assume means he knows he's going to die. Mm-hmm. So she's like, and what would you have me do? And she's just looking all sad and stuff.
So
and he's
depressed,
like, have you do? I want you to smile and be happy. And he thinks, I'm assuming, that she's already mourning the loss of his life. But no, she's just upset because she got dumped.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a little annoyed about that. Like, her father's basically saying, Uncle, I'm going to die and you're going to be the queen. And she's like, but Aragorn left me.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm just like...
And like in her sadness, she's like just resigning herself to this cage that she told Aragorn she didn't want to be in. Because she's just like, what other duties would you have me perform? And just like not giving any lip back like she had been, trying to stand up for herself and her place.
Yeah, so she's just totally given up. I think it was in the last episode you were saying that even if this doesn't work out between the two of them, Aragorn's almost inspiring her to be this fighter. But now that he's no longer in the picture, she's just completely given up. So yeah, I was a little disappointed to see she kind of resigned herself. But later in this section, she does something that makes me wonder if she did fully resign herself. But we'll get to that in a bit.
Very shortly.
But first, we catch up a little bit more with Legolas and Gimli and Aragorn. And Legolas is telling the men of the Mountain story. So basically, they were a part of Gondor, and then at some point, they fled to the mountain, and Isildur cursed them. So then they reach this entrance, and Legolas reads it out loud, and I should have written it down the first time, and then they actually say it a second time, but it was something like, the way is shut.
The dead have made it, yeah.
And then he says it again, the way is shut. And then after he says it, there's this big gust of magical air coming out, and then the horses run away. And then Aragorn, being the baddie that he is like, I don't fear death. And then he runs in.
Oh, so sexy. I love that part. I do not fear death.
And then Legolas runs in, and then Gimli, in his typical comedic relief self, is like, oh no, I'm not going to let an elf go where no dwarf has gone before. And I have to say, this entire section is just fully Skyrim, which I will talk about during the creature that we meet later. But I'm just like, wait, is Skyrim just a full-on copy of Lord of the Rings?
Now I have to play Skyrim.
You really do need to play it, because every single part of this section.
Or I can just build this in Minecraft.
Oh my gosh, no, it's way more fun. Literally, playing Skyrim is just like watching Lord of the Rings, but it's interactive.
I'll have to try it one day.
So then they all run in, and then we cut back to all of the men of Rohan and all of those places fighting for Gondor, right?
Yeah. Well, at this point, they're fighting for all of men. It's kind of like if these nations can't come together and all fight, then they're screwed. So they are going to Gondor, but I think they're definitely not fighting for Denethor, I can tell you that much.
So Merry wants to fight, and Theoden is basically at this point just telling him no. So he says they have to ride light and fast because they have a 3-day ride ahead of them, and then once they arrive, they have to be able to fight. So he says all of his riders can't bear him as a burden, which I feel really bad for him, but I do kind of understand, because I mean, he can't run, but I don't know. I mean, is it that much harder to have a little halfling on your horse? I don't know.
Yeah.
But thankfully, Éowyn comes and she grabs him onto her horse, and she's like, oh, you're coming with me. And he's like, oh, my lady.
And I burst into tears.
Really? You
I cried once in this section.
That?
It was there.
That's
I
the
love
moment
it.
that made you want to cry?
Because they're just like, they're not supposed to be there. And they literally know they're going to die, and they're doing it anyway. Like, those two characters riding out together is just really powerful to me.
No, it's not. I'm just kidding. No, I definitely didn't feel the same way as you do. But I can understand your perspective here. And then just for a second, we get to see a glimpse of the orc army, and it is truly massive. We saw, as the riders of Rohan were galloping away, we saw how many there were. And at first I was like, wow, there's so many of them. And then we see the orcs, and I was like, wow, there's so many of them. And not just orcs, they have giants, they have trolls, and these giant, I don't know what they're called, but they have these like towers.
They call them towers, yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's what they're called.
The two towers?
The very specific name for these, the towers.
So then we cut back to under the mountain, and the King of the Dead's voice echoes throughout the cavern, and he says, who enters my domain? And Aragorn is like, hey, you guys have to fight for me. And the Dead King kind of just laughs at him. So first of all, really cool CGI here. But we see all this ghostly towers coming up, and this ghostly city.
Yeah.
And all of these ghost skeletons, which again, very reminiscent of Skyrim, all surrounding them, and there's just a ton of them. But they're all ghosts, so I wasn't sure, are these people going to be able to fight? Like, are they corporeal, or are they able to interact with humans, or are they just spirits? So all of the skeletons come out, and we see the King of the Dead, and he's really cool too. Really cool CGI here, because at some points he looks fully like a skeleton, and sometimes you can see a little bit of the man that he was.
Yeah, I love that they do that. It's really subtle, but yes.
Yeah, very subtle. Because at one point I was like, wait, is he a skeleton? Because I thought in the first shot he didn't have a nose. And then in the second shot he did. And I was like, wait, did I just imagine that? But then in the third shot he didn't again. And I was like, oh, this is really cool.
It's just like switching back and forth. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was really fun. And then Aragorn pulls out his sword, the reforged sword, and he's like, I summon you to fulfill your oath. And and he tells them that they need to fight to regain their honor. Well, I guess actually he asks them. He doesn't tell them. He always gives them the choice. So we don't find out just yet what's going to happen there, because then we cut back to the White City and Faramir's horse dragged him all the way home, and his body is just riddled with arrows and blood. And I wrote down, oh, so now the steward pretends to be sad. I already forgot his name.
Yep. He's like, my son, Denethor.
Yeah.
But he's like, oh, my son is dead. But then he says, my line is ending. It's like he only cares that his line is ending.
He's like, oh, my kids are dead. Oh, my line is ending. Oh, I'm so sad. And somebody says none survived. And meanwhile, the orcs are absolutely terrifying. They start shooting catapults of all the heads of the soldiers they killed, which is really gross.
Release the prisoners. And then it's just heads. It's so gross. Ugh.
And then Pippin notices that Faramir is still alive, but the steward is so... I didn't know at this point if he was faking being upset or if he was just looking for an excuse to give up, because he's like, oh, Rohan has deserted us, my line is dead, blah, blah, blah. And he's like going on. And then Mr. Pigman, your favorite orc, starts shooting rocks. Oh, Pigface, I'm sorry. And the steward continues to kind of rant, and he's like, Theoden's betrayed me. And then he starts yelling for people to abandon their posts and flee, which is so awful. Like, seriously, this guy is not salvageable in my opinion.
Yeah.
After that line he said to Faramir about how he wishes that Faramir was dead instead of Boromir, I was like, I don't think this guy's getting redeemed. And I think I'm still right. He's not getting redeemed here. And then Gandalf, totally agreeing with me, smacks him with his staff and knocks him out, which is incredible.
I love that.
And he starts yelling for people to get back to their posts and stay to fight. And then the Nazgul are coming in on their dragons, which I didn't mention this in the last episode, but when we were talking about the Nazgul and their dragons, you called them flying horses.
Oh my gosh, I did not call them flying horses. What? No, I did not.
You absolutely did. You did, because I was thinking Leah has a very fast and loose definition of what a horse is, because this is very clearly a dragon.
I do not remember that, but good thing that we've been recording all this. I'm sure whatever episode I said that in already has come out.
You said something like, oh, imagine if you're snatched out of the air by a flying horse.
No, that's not what I said. I know what I said. I said, imagine if you were crushed by a flying horse, because they picked up the horse and threw the horse.
Oh.
And what if the horse hit you?
I guess that makes a lot more sense. After you said that, I was thinking, I thought they were dragons, but I know in the first movie, or maybe it was the second, you said they weren't specifically dragons. You said they were something else. And so I was looking at them a little closer because I was thinking about what you said, but I was like, these are not horses. Leah is strange. Very loose definition of the word horse.
Every time you mention them as dragons, I keep meaning to say...
Are you just going to say something like wyverns or something that's just a dragon?
I don't think that they're wyverns. I know it's not dragons because the last dragon that ever existed died during The Hobbit.
Oh.
Okay, they're just called fell beasts.
Okay, so they're dragons. We can all agree that they're dragons.
Hellhawks is another word. Nazgul birds are 3 names that they're known by.
Okay, so obviously J.R.R. Tolkien has a very fast and loose definition of what a bird is, because that is not a bird.
I like hellhawks. That's pretty cool, though.
Yeah, but they're not hawks either. Yeah. They're dragons. They're a variation of dragons. So anyway, they come in and they do their terrible screeching again, and I have decided that one of my least favorite sounds in existence is the screeching of the hellhawks. It is just terrible. And you know what? The soldiers agree with me, because people are holding their ears. It is just such a bad sound. And Gandalf is really taking over here. So at the beginning of this episode, we mentioned that he was kind of wondering where his place was, if it was his place to step up and take charge. And it seems like he's realized that that is something he needs to do.
Absolutely.
So he's leading everybody. He's kind of telling them like where to shoot, aim for the trolls, don't aim for the towers. And Pippin is running around like a little halfling, which he is. And he gets knocked over, and Gandalf sees him and he's like, what are you doing here? This is no place for a hobbit. And Pippin's like, I want to fight.
He looks so scared.
Yeah, he's definitely scared, but he's being very brave right now. And Gandalf is being super cool, just running around, knocking people out, saving Pippin's life over and over again. And then there's one bad guy who comes for Gandalf, and Pippin runs up and stabs him and kills him, which I thought was really awesome, seeing Pippin just really stepping up and saving Gandalf's life, basically.
And Gandalf was appreciative too.
Yeah, so he's definitely appreciative, and then he's like, okay, you gotta get out of here now, and he basically runs away. And also, I wrote a note down here, and maybe this will come into play later in this movie, but where are the Oliphants that we saw in the last
that's
movie?
a good question.
Because they're big creatures.
You know what? We'll see. We'll see what happens with the Oliphants.
Okay, but we'll have to see. And then the last thing we see of that battle is this scary metal contraption that looks like a dragon that's made of metal, and it's got a fire inside, and they're bringing it over. So I don't know what that is, but I'm scared.
It's Grond. What do you mean?
Oh, of course. Gron, my friend.
Yeah, Grond.
And then we cut back to Gollum and Frodo. And I have to say, at this point, after seeing The King of the Dead, I was like, uh-oh, if this is Skyrim, I know what this creature is going to be. It's going to be a giant spider.
Yeah.
I knew it. I knew as soon as we got to the scene, I was like, it's going to be a spider.
Before you saw the webs and stuff, you knew?
Yeah, I saw him looking into the cave, and he's like, I don't want to go in there. And I was like, if Skyrim copied Lord of the Rings, which it did, then this is going to be a giant spider. And of course, that's exactly what it is.
Exactly what it
so
was.
We don't find out for a little bit. Frodo doesn't want to go in, and Gollum tells him it's either go in or go back. So he leads him in, and I'm just like, I know it's going to be a spider. I know it's a spider. So we see the webs, and it's basically confirmed she is a spider. And then Gollum disappears, and Frodo whispers, Sam.
I know.
And then he starts noticing all the dead bodies. Did you cry?
I didn't cry here.
Okay,
in
good.
this whole scene, Frodo is just a mess. He cannot do this by himself.
Huge
He
mess,
needs Sam by his side.
So then we see Sam, which I was really shocked. I was convinced we were going to see Sam save his life here, but no, Sam's actually on his way back down the stairs.
And to be honest, as a watcher, I was also surprised that Sam left because I had the same feeling as you. The next time we were going to see him, he was going to be saving Frodo, but he actually did leave, which I was shocked.
And then he starts slipping and falling, and he takes a tumble down the stairs.
And he's like crying as he's doing it.
Oh, I was thinking that's me right there. That's me on an adventure, just tumbling and falling and
crying the whole time.
And then he sees the elven bread, and he's crying even harder, and he's looking up, and we know that he knows that he has to go back. And then Frodo's freaking out in the spider's den. He's running around, and it's honestly really gross. So we see the spider. She starts chasing after him. There's all these dead bodies. At one point, Frodo gets totally stuck in the web, and he's just like trying to cut himself out. So it's super disgusting and terrifying. And we see the spider coming up behind him. And then he hears Galadriel, and he remembers that he's got this star water. So he pulls that out, and the light is holding her back. And at this point, Gollum comes in, and he's like, ooh, naughty little fly, you're caught in her web, and soon you're gonna be eaten.
He sings this whole song with a perfect rhyme because he says like, caught in your web, soon you'll be dead, but he says eaten. And that makes me laugh every single time.
So then Frodo cuts his way out of the web, and his sword gets stuck, so he leaves it there, which I thought was pretty significant because isn't that the sword that Bilbo gave him?
And that's the sword that Bilbo found in Gollum's cave.
Oh, really? Okay. Kind of full circle here, left in a cave.
Yeah, exactly. But that's why I'm saying he's useless without Sam. Even the whole time, he's like, he shines the light, he falls. He shines the light, he falls. He shines the light, he gets stuck in a web. He loses everything. Like Frodo, who left him alone, Sam.
So then he manages to get himself out of the cave, and then Gollum is super mad, so he grabs him and they start having a fight. And Frodo starts strangling him in a really interesting mirror of what we saw Smeagol doing in the beginning of the film. But Frodo is different because Frodo actually stops because Gollum, annoyingly, talks himself out of getting killed again.
And the fact that at this point Frodo believes him, it's so much less about Gollum and so much more about Frodo because if Gollum is lost, Frodo is lost, and he's saving Gollum for himself as much as he is for Gollum, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And then Frodo basically tells him that. He says, I have to destroy it for both of us. And then Gollum tries one last ditch effort to grab him. They have another little struggle, and then Gollum falls off the side of the cliff. And I assume he dies. Does he die?
I can't tell you.
Oh my gosh, so he's not dead. I was thinking like, yes, he's finally dead. I know you have some potential feelings for Gollum, but
Feelings for Gollum.
Romantic
You're making
feelings.
it sound romantic.
She's got a little
I
crush,
have a crush on Gollum.
guys.
Ew, I don't. I just think he's adorable in like a pet way.
No, I gotta disagree.
You know, Frodo thinks that after this he can go back to the Shire and Gollum can be his little house dog. Like, that's what he's imagining.
No. I was looking forward to seeing it because I do think that Gollum is being very manipulative, and I do understand there's this sort of split within himself between Gollum and Smeagol, and that's why I've been calling him Gollum ever since he came up with this plot, because I don't really think he's Smeagol right now.
He's not, yeah.
But I'm hoping that Gollum is dead for good.
Yeah.
So maybe Smeagol will come back.
We'll come back, yeah.
And then Frodo apologizes to Sam, who's not there. He just says, "I'm sorry, Sam," and then he falls to the ground. But when he falls, he's no longer on that cliffside. He's in a forest. And he looks up, and who's there? It's Galadriel.
Yay.
And you know what she tells him? Only you can do this, and if you can't, then nobody can, and basically the world is gonna end. So it's up to you. You gotta get up.
So I'm nice and smiling at you, but you gotta do this, dude. Like,
Yeah.
I know I'm being nice right now, but this is serious.
Yeah, she's like, "Stop messing around, please. Go get your sword." No, she didn't say that. But I am thinking about that sword a lot still. And I do hope that he goes back and gets it, but I have a feeling that he won't. So she pulls him back up, and then he's back on the cliffside. So I don't know if that was just like a vision, just for like a motivational moment for him, but he does get back up, and that is where we end this section.
Yeah. Ooh, we're getting into it. I can't believe we're only halfway through. This is crazy.
I know. We've been talking a lot more, I think, for the third movie so far. And I think that's just because even though we have the same size sections, or even a little bit smaller, I think we're finding ourselves just discussing a lot more of why we think things are happening the way they're happening, and also digressing a lot.
Oh, yeah. All the side stories. I hope you're enjoying getting to know us a little better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think in this movie, there's so much to talk about and so much to discuss and character motivations and all that stuff. So it's all very exciting.
And if you are enjoying it so far, please consider giving us a rating, following us on whatever streaming platform you listen to so you get a little notification when new episodes come out. I don't think it actually notifies you, but I think it shows up in your new episodes section.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
please consider doing that. Please consider giving us a 5-star rating. It really does mean a lot to us. And follow us on social media if you want to join the conversation.
I love answering the tweets that people send us because
Me too.
I love talking about the Lord of the Rings. So if someone's going to tweet at me about the Lord of the Rings, you betcha I'm answering.
Yeah, correct, Leah. Send us memes. Do whatever you think is
Ooh,
right.
memes. I love a meme.
Yeah, we do love Lord of the Rings memes. I'm trying not to see too many of them because I want to wait until I'm done with the film so I don't spoil myself. But I have seen a few of them and they're pretty funny.
Yeah, definitely some good ones.
All right, so we'll see you next week for another episode for The Lord of the Rings 3, The Three Kings.
Something about the king.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
You've been listening to the It's All Geek to Me podcast, hosted by Leah and Kelly. Make sure to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast player and give us a rating. You can also find us on Twitter at All Geek Podcast. New episodes drop every Thursday. See you next week.